Hi, this is Analytics, and welcome to another lesson. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts or questions in the comments. Let's get started. For this lesson, we're going to use this file right here, Sales Excel. I'm going to open this file, and this is the table we are going to use, but we will focus on this column right here, Sales Amount. Let's load it into Power Query. We already know how to do it. And I need to use this column right here, sales amount. So for this lesson, I'm going to remove all other columns and duplicate this column so we can compare two ways to round numbers in Power Query. To duplicate this column, I just have to right-click the column header and then select Duplicate Column. Now I have two copies of the same column. If you want, you can rename this table. I'm going to call it sales underscore data. Okay. You don't have to, for this example, you don't really have to change the name, only if you want to do so. First off, I want to give you a little tip that we haven't seen before. And look, for this table, we have the automatic changed type step, as we have discussed in previous videos. So in this case, I don't want this change type step, but look, we made two changes after the change type steps. We removed the other columns and we duplicated the columns. So now our change type step, it's in the middle, it's before the two last steps that we created, and that is not a problem. In Power Query, you can remove steps in the middle. The only thing that you have to be aware of is that depending on the change or the transformation that you are removing along with your step, the step that you are deleting, this may affect the following steps. For example, if in this intermediate step I had, for example, created a given column, and then these two last steps were performed on that same column that I created in this step. So in case I remove this step, so that column is not going to exist anymore. So the next steps that used that very same column, they will return an error because they are looking for a column that you created in this step. But since you removed the step, so the column will not be available for the following step. So pay attention, because removing intermediate step could cause you problems, could return you errors depending on the effect it's going to cause on the following steps. But in this case, in our real data here, I'm just removing the data type step. So removing other columns doesn't depend on data types. I can remove columns even if I have changed the data type or not, and duplicating a column also doesn't depend on the data type. I can remove any column even if I change the data type or not. So removing the change type step will not break my following steps. Look, in this case, when I remove the other columns, I don't have anymore the data type assigned by Power Query, but it didn't keep me from removing the other columns. And I also duplicated the column, and not having the data types assigned won't keep me from duplicating any column. So just be mindful that depending on what you are removing in terms of intermediate steps, it could or not affect the remaining steps. Okay, so this is just a quick tip, but what I actually wanted to learn in this lesson is that there are different ways that we can use to round numbers in Power Query. And in previous videos, we saw that, for example, just changing the data type to currency will affect our numbers and leave us only with two decimal places. In this case, I have many decimal places, but if I just change the data type to currency, I will have only two decimal places. Very simple, very easy. And in this column right here, I'm going to do it different. I'm going to use the button for rounding numbers. So we can say that in this column, I rounded the numbers in an indirect way, but let's round the numbers in this second column in a direct way, actually using the button for rounding numbers. But before, I have to change the data type and make it a decimal numbers. Okay, so marking this column as decimals will keep all the decimal places, and Power Query now is reading this column as numbers, as decimal numbers, but I haven't done any routing yet. I just classified the numbers in this column as decimals, keeping all the decimal places, but I haven't done any rounding yet. So to round these numbers to the same two decimal places, I will do it directly, going to the transform tab, and then look, there is a rounding button. So if you click the small down arrow, you will see there are mainly three options here. If I click round up, I'm going to force the numbers to the next upper integer. So the next integer above the current number. For example, here in this first row, it'll get me 48 if I use round up. Okay, 48. Let me remove the last step. And now I'm using the round down. So it's going to round down to the nearest lower integer. In this case, it's going to be 47 round. 47, but that's not what I want at this point. What I actually want is to do the rounding to two decimal places. So I'm going to use the third choice, round, and I will pick two decimal places. And there you go. So now you can see we have two columns. Both of them were rounded to two decimal places, but we did it in an indirect way in this column because we only rounded it by changing the data type to currency. And in this column, I changed it into the decimal data type, but now I rounded it to two decimal places. So if you take a look at all the numbers, and if you look row by row, it looks like the numbers are the same. It looks like the results are exactly the same for both columns, but actually they're not. And to show that, I'm going to select this column, and I'm going to multiply all the numbers in this column. I'm going to multiply them by 3. And how can I do it? There's an easy way to do it. I just have to use, in the transform tab, I'm going to use the standard button, and choose multiply. So I'm going to multiply all the numbers in this column by 3. I'm going to multiply it by 3, hit OK, and then all my numbers are multiplied by 3. But now I'm going to do the same with this second column, standard multiply by 3, and you will see that my numbers are no longer the same. So in my first row, for example, I have 143.98, and then in the second column, it's 143.97. So it's just a 1 cent difference, but this difference over the entire column could make a high difference at the end. So be careful. And why is this happening? Why am if the columns were the same and I multiply both of them by the same number, by 3, so why are the results different? And I'm going to show you why. I will change the data type in this first column, and I'll make it decimal numbers. And when I select decimal numbers, you will see that my numbers now show 4 decimal places. And if I do the same with the second one, well, actually the second one is already in the decimal format. And look, I no longer have 4 decimal places in this column because I wanted it to be rounded. I used the button to round it to 2 decimal places, which means I no longer have a third or fourth decimal place. They are supposed to be 0, so which means they are worth nothing. So I actually directly told Power Query to round my numbers to only 2 decimal places in such a way that I will have zeros beyond the second decimal place, which means there's nothing actually after the second decimal place. But in the first column, when I rounded it by changing the data type to currency, to you, it looks like there's only 2 decimal places, but actually all the decimal places are still there. The only thing is that Power Query is showing you the numbers in a different format with only 2 decimal places, but it did not actually round the numbers to 2 decimal places. It is only showing the first 2 decimal places, but the other ones are still there. So when you run any kind of calculations, those decimal places beyond the second will still affect your calculation. So that's why when you run the same calculations in both columns, you will get different results, because for this column right here, the third and fourth decimal places and any other decimal place beyond that will be included in the calculation. In this one, we have nothing beyond the second, in our example, beyond the second decimal place. So that's why we have different results, and I'm going to show you the effect on the final result. So I'm going to, on the query right here, I'm going to right click and select duplicate. So I'm going to duplicate my query, right? I have the same table twice, and in this first table, I'm going to keep selected the first column, and I'm going to sum up all the numbers in this column. I'm going in the transform tab, I click statistics and then sum. So I have the overall sum. And in the second query, I'm going to select the second column and do the same. Transform, statistics, and sum. And now you can see that I have 999 as the last three numbers before the decimal place, of course. And then here I have 97. Here I have 070. So pretty much it's 907,999. And here it's 971,070. So at the end of the day, it makes a lot of a difference. So you may be asking what should be the right way, the best way to work. And I'll tell you, I don't have an answer for that. This depends on what you are doing, depends on your needs. So I just wanted to know that rounding numbers by changing the data type to currency can be tricky. So just be aware of what's going on and consider that when you are planning your data model. Okay, I hope you liked this video. If this video helped you in some way, please don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel, share this content with your friends, and if you have any questions, leave the comments below, and see you in the next lesson.